This is a tangent or a forest trip, skógarferð as we call it here in Iceland, combined with a literal one, where I'm trying to exorcise some of the persistent thoughts that wanted to come out as tangents in a late video, but I had to stifle because 24 minutes is already too long. So what I wanted to talk about in that video but couldn't was the transformation of spy media into its modern incarnation, where it's the sort of three big entities in spy media: Jack Ryan, Tom Cruise's generic spy person in the Mission Impossible movies, and James Bond, kind of reflect some of the, well, not quite propaganda, but it's kind of like reflecting some of the underlying nastiness that governs the sort of what the pretentious would call Pax Americana. As in, you've got these three figures: the Jack Ryan, who is the analyst type, the signals intelligence type that looks at patterns, that pulls together like observations and discovers what's going on and thinks strategically. He's the sort of, even though he's always associated with the CIA, he's a NSA type in sort of spy parlance. Then you have the Mission Impossible people, which are the kind of the heist people. The go in there, infiltrate, and get this stuff, get data out, because sometimes you just can't surveillance yourself into the data you need. And James Bond is actually, from one perspective, actually quite realistic in that he represents the US drive to use allied nations and their partners to do the dirty work for them, and he's the person that goes in and messes things up by killing everybody and giving the Americans plausible deniability, even as he tries to and the only payment they get is a spurious credit for having helped save the world order, even though it's spy stuff. They can't even claim it for their own, neither in the text or in reality. But you basically got these three pillars of modern espionage, who basically represent the sort of transition from the Cold War spies to the terrorist spies that went from we are fighting two equal and opposing forces, two giants fighting each other, to now we're monitoring a bunch of people who look like normal people and shouldn't really be that scary, but hand wavy weapons of mass destruction. Oh my god, they're a threat, so we need to actually surveil and shoot everybody who worries us. And it's, I mean, Jack Ryan is interesting because it kind of started kind of in the Glasnost era, and he sort of followed this transition quite neatly. I actually read quite a few of the Jack Ryan books that preceded, like before 2000. My granddad was a huge fan, and so in my foolish desire to have something to talk about with my granddad, that wasn't like historical Reykjavik architecture or the detailed history of politics in Iceland. I decided to basically read all the books, and well, instead of because I was even a complete kind of nerd back then, so instead of it being an opportunity to talk about narrative structure and storytelling with him, turns out he was mostly interested in the authenticity of the procedures and processes there, because he worked for the Americans. He worked in a department called J2, Joint Staff Intelligence, and before that, he worked for OAS, and both times he was working as a researcher and translator. So he was quite familiar with how things worked in the whole sort of, at least from the bureaucratic low-level perspective of espionage. And so his thing was basically enjoying how well Tom Clancy's research was, and enjoying himself even more when Tom Clancy took some sort of literary license to deviate from established procedure. But still read all the books, because at least it gave us an opportunity to talk about office bureaucracy in the US espionage era. See, this is exactly the sort of tangent that I don't want to put in the main video, because that took 3-4 minutes, and it's an interesting story, made me a little bit sad, but it doesn't really add anything to the argument. But getting back to the main tangent, the thing that I find interesting is this sort of crisis that the spy media is encountering as we have gone further and further into the terrorist era of spy media, where it's becoming more and more obvious that these are activities that are being used to further and justify horrific things. And like the Amazon Prime spy series is just literal CIA propaganda. It's just, they're not even trying to be subtle about how they're justifying the manipulative reach of US politics around the world. And the same thing kind of applies with the crisis that they're having to. This is the time when they have to end Mission Impossible, because it has to either go into sci-fi, complete sci-fi. I mean, spy media has all been sci-fi adjacent, but into complete sci-fi, like all alternate history era kind of sci-fi, because there's no way to portray even like the Biden era, just most of the past 16 years of US politics resists the characterization of heroism. And then you have James Bond, which sensibly, in the sort of last few movies, decided to turn inwards and become like an introspective look at James Bond history, both narrative and in history, in movie history, and kind of managed to become a little bit contemplative at the end of it. It's flawed. I mean, it's not like, it's not great cinema, but the sort of the last few movies of the Barbara Broccoli era of James Bond demonstrated a sort of self-awareness and understanding of where we stand as a society that you don't usually expect from big Hollywood producers, which is kind of makes sense that this was the end of it, that they couldn't follow it up with. There's no real way to go from there except rebooting it as a period piece and just setting it in the Cold War. But that would kind of undermine everything that the Broccolis and the Ian production have tried to do, because they started during that era. So it's like, if you're rebooting it, we're going to do the Cold War again. They already did that, and any attempt to do a historical Bond is implicit criticism of what they did, what her father did. So basically asking Jeff Bezos for a humongous amount of money and then just scarpering and letting him fuck it up seems like the right thing to do. But it kind of makes me sad, the whole state of spy media, because it obviously reminds me of the world. Things are so awful at the moment. Anyway, sort of gonna turn the music on and try to zen out for the rest of the hike, because this is bummed me out, to be honest.